Officer Rado was on duty along a busy commercial street in Manila, directing cars away from a temporary roadblock caused by a construction accident. Sweat rolled down his forehead, but he stayed focused and calm. A large black SUV pushed through the stopped vehicles and ignored his warning hand signal. Rado stepped forward and motioned for the driver to pull over. The window rolled down, and Mark, a tall American with a broad chest and loud voice, stared at him with open amusement. You're the officer," he scoffed. He leaned out, measuring Rado's height with his hand. "Man, you're too short to stop anyone." Before Rado could finish saying, "Sir, please cooperate," Mark suddenly stepped out of the SUV, looked down at him, and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed across the traffic. "I will teach the biggest lesson you will never forget in hurry," the police officer, as he tightened his face, cried. The people nearby froze. Some pulled out their phones, while others backed away slowly. Mark towered over Rado, laughing as if he had done something entertaining. Lisa, sitting in the passenger seat, was pale and shaking, unable to believe what her husband had done. Rado touched his cheek gently, his hand steady despite the sting. He lifted his head and spoke in a calm tone that surprised everyone. "Sir, you have committed assault on a police officer. You are under arrest." Mark rolled his eyes and waved him off, but Rado already called for backup. When the patrol officers arrived, they surrounded the SUV. Rado gave a clear order. They handcuffed them and take Mark and Lisa into custody for processing. Mark protested loudly, but he was placed in handcuffs and taken to the station. Lisa followed quietly, head lowered. Lisa said in a lower tone, "My husband is always quick to anger. Now see where his temper has landed us too." Inside the station, the atmosphere changed. The playful arrogance in Mark's face slowly faded as he realized that everything was taken seriously. Officer Rado documented the entire event, attaching witness statements and video evidence collected from the scene. Mark kept insisting, "I'm an American. You can't treat me like this." But his voice cracked slightly every time he said it. Lisa sat in a corner, trembling, tears forming in her eyes. She apologized repeatedly, but Rado remained respectful and calm. "Ma'am, the law is the law," he said. "You were present during the disturbance, so you will undergo the legal process with him." Mark snapped at her to stop crying, but his own hands trembled. The legal processing was slow. Because the case involved assaulting an officer, the charges went through a strict review. Mark expected embassy officials to rush in and rescue him, but they arrived only to explain that laws in the Philippines must still be respected. "We cannot erase what you did," they said firmly. As days passed, Mark realized he was no longer in control. He and Lisa were placed in detention, not as punishment, but as part of the legal procedure for serious charges. The first night, Mark shouted and cursed. The second night, he was quieter. By the third, he stared at the cell wall in silence. Officer Rado walked past him every shift, calm and professional, not once raising his voice or looking for revenge. That bothered Mark more than any punishment. 3 months passed slowly. Mark's hair grew messy, his voice lost its power, and his shoulders sagged. Lisa tried her best to stay strong, but stress weighed heavily on her. At night, she often sat on the bench with her hands over her face, whispering to herself. There were times when Mark tried to act tough, but even the other detainees ignored him. They had seen his videos online, videos the witnesses uploaded, which showed the slap clearly. Each time he heard someone mention it, Mark's cheeks burned with embarrassment. Meanwhile, Officer Rado remained the same, focused, disciplined, and silent. He treated Mark and Lisa like any other detainees, with fairness, but without special treatment. At the 5th month, everything changed. Mark caught a fever and spent weeks lying on his bunk, sweating and shaking. Lisa begged him to apologize, but he kept refusing, too proud to admit he was wrong. But as his strength faded, so did his pride. One quiet evening, he overheard 2 officers talking outside the cell. If he had just respected Rado from his start, none of this would have happened. The words struck him deeper than he expected. He realized the truth. He wasn't here because he was foreign. He was here because he had humiliated a man who was simply doing his job with dignity. The 6th month arrived with heavy rain outside the station. Mark spent the morning pacing inside the detention cell, rubbing his tired face and whispering to himself. He finally turned to Lisa and said in a defeated voice, "I can't go on like this." Lisa's eyes softened with relief. She had been waiting for that moment. She went to the front desk and asked for Officer Rado. When Rado arrived, Mark stood up straight, though his hands shook slightly. For the first time, his voice was quiet. "Officer Rado, I want to speak to you. Please." In a small office, Mark finally broke. He sat on a chair, elbows on his knees, head down. "I insulted you. I treated you like you were less than me. I thought being taller, being American made me better, but these 6 months have shown me how wrong I was." His voice cracked. "I am sorry for slapping you. I am sorry for mocking your height. I am sorry for everything." Officer Rado listened without interrupting. When Mark finished, Rado opened a folder and placed a document on the table. It was an undertaking, a formal promise. Mark picked up the pen with trembling fingers and signed it. When the ink dried, Rado nodded to the desk officer. After 6 long months, the release order was processed. Lisa hugged Mark tightly, overwhelmed with relief. The officers opened the gate and allowed the couple to step outside. The air felt fresh, too fresh for Mark, who had almost forgotten what freedom felt like. He turned toward Rado, who stood under the station's entrance roof, watching quietly. For a moment, he struggled to speak. Then he bowed his head, deeply and sincerely. "Thank you," he said softly, "for doing your duty and for teaching me respect." Rado simply answered, "Go in peace and remember your promise." Mark nodded, knowing he would never forget it. From that day on, Mark never insulted a Filipino officer again, not because he feared punishment, but because he finally understood that respect is not measured in height, nationality, or power, but in character.